The postseason started with 4 tremendous, at least entertaining games, and the Twins were in none of them. We are about to start a series called Twins Postseason Autopsies to break down why they aren't there. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren, and you can unfollow me on the tweets at Brendan_WARNE. I've been watching this Twins team since 1993. Terrible year to start, but we got through those lean years, and then things got fun. How fun have the last couple years been? Well, we're going to talk about the most recent one in this episode. Thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we're your team every day. I am joined, as always, by Mr. Dave Brown at Answer Dave Brown on the tweets. He's been in the BBWAA for 12 years, going on 13 years now, professional ball writer for a quarter century. And we won't tell you who he grew up watching. But, Dave, what up?
No, we don't want to mention that. I was thinking about the title of the show. It reminds me of the old Alien Autopsy fact or fiction that was on Fox. So I wonder if Twins Autopsy fact or fiction, are we going to find the dead body of the Twins, and is it real or is it fake or whatever? Are they really in the playoffs, and we're just there's some sort of Mandela effect going on? I hope that's what it is.
Maybe the Twins are in the playoffs and we're all dead, and this is all just a simulation.
It wouldn't surprise me if podcasts were part of hell.
Yeah. Twitter definitely is. But anyhow, today's episode, though, brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the accommodation partner, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Again, today or right now here on this program, we're going to talk about 3 separate issues that plagued the Twins throughout 2024, leading to a season barely over 500, barely over, not Bailey over. So we got 3 segments. We're going to spend a segment on each individual item, and honestly, just keep doing shows until we run out of items. So I think we've got plenty of content to dive into. The first one, and we're going to go in kind of like a chronological order, not, necessarily A, then B, then C, but we're not going to deviate too much from that. So where this all kind of stems from is the Twins slashing 25.1-ish million off their payroll from last year, according to SpotTrack. 156 and change in 2023, 130 and change, almost 131 in 2024. Now, Dave, I have pulled and then subsequently closed the window because that's just how things work. A look at what players could have been had for about 25, 26 million. So the difference there, now, with that said, Sonny Gray pretty easily just kind of fits into that slot. Now, with that said, am I that it wasn't him? No. And even now, it sounds like the Cardinals might shop him for a trade this offseason. Not really thinking the Twins are going to be in that mix, but nevertheless, players in that. What window do you think we should go with? Like 20 million to 25 million?
That's a good window. I think that's an appropriate place to at least look. We're just being hypothetical here.
Now, not all of these players were available, and in fact, maybe some of them weren't. But this is a general concept of the type of player you can get for that money. Salvador Perez, Nathan Eovaldi, Kyle Schwarber, Joe Musgrove, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Austin Riley, Chris Bassett, Robbie Ray, Zach Wheeler. Boy, that was a hot spot here, a sore spot. Blake Snell, JT Realmuto, Kevin Gausman, Luis Castillo, Aaron Nola, Jordan Montgomery. More on that in another lifetime. Xander Bogaerts, Christian Yelich, Freddie Freeman, Cody Bellinger's in that general area, Carlos Rodon, all of which is to say that they could have gotten, quite a nice player. Sonny Gray probably, I'm guessing, has his deal a little bit backloaded so that he didn't show up on this list. But nevertheless, the very obvious elephant in the room is that maybe the Twins weren't one player short, but you could also allocate that money in different ways, or a trade,
a couple of $10 million guys, maybe,
or a trade acquisition in season that you cover their salary. Any number of ways. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat, but the overwhelming takeaway is, guys, you should have spent the money, and they didn't, and now they're sitting at home.
Well, you're right about the trading of resources and the shifting of money. That the Twins were very creative in the offseason, I guess you could call it, in making moves where they made other people pay the salaries of players that they were acquiring. Some of that, of course, is a product of not being willing to spend a lot of money, but that's how they got Margot. And Margot, for in the end, we all wish he would have been better. But for a while, he did what they hoped. He hit well against left-handed pitching, not including his pinch hitting appearances, legendary streak though it was. So, but Valve's definitely shown himself. He definitely has an ability to make the creative kind of trades where you bring in somebody from another team and make them, the other team, pay. But with a little more money, you can get a little better quality of player. And I think we saw, you can't always foresee injuries, but the Twins do rely on 2 or 3 players who have histories of missing a lot of games. Buxton and Carlos Correa and Royce Lewis in his young career so far. So it would make sense to me for them to have added a little more depth. A $10 million player here, a $10 million player there, somebody in the rotation, somebody in the lineup. And that alone might have made the difference in terms of ending a slump, stopping a streak, turning things around, giving a lift at an important time. There's a lot of blame to go around, but the first domino was definitely the ownership deciding we can't add any more payroll.
Well, and if you don't require money picked up in trades, I mean, maybe you get something better back from Seattle. Certainly, I think the pieces all could have been useful had things gone to plan. But maybe instead of the bit pieces, you get an Emerson Hancock or, not one of the 5 guys that they leaned on heavily, Brian Wu, Gilbert, Kirby. You're not getting any of those guys. But you maybe get something more viable than Justin Topa, who gave you less than a handful of innings at the end of the year. Gabriel Gonzalez, who, he didn't have that great of a year. Obviously, Desclafani.
He's still 20 years old, and playing at upper
Double A,
level.
right?
Yes.
Well, and so Desclafani does not provide anything, and I think Darren Bowen got hit pretty hard in the minors. So, nobody really won that trade, as Polanco really, really had a tough year with the Mariners outside of a brief stretch in the middle of the season. So, yeah, I think it cuts a lot of different ways, the payroll reduction, and we've it's not both sidesing the issue, but we've talked about how that added $25 million doesn't guarantee that you don't take an absolute poop all over the field in the second half like the Twins did. It doesn't guarantee anything. Does it make it less likely? I think that's a pretty easy assertion to make without having to, back it up with a ton of data, especially if that money had been spent on another starter, to where you could have concentrated your innings used from Simeon Woods Richardson, Zebby Matthews, and David Festa. Maybe Zebby doesn't get that extra 20, 30 innings of 8 ERA down the stretch, so on and so forth. You're better equipped to handle Joe Ryan's absence. And so to that end, would the Twins end up missing the playoffs by 4 games?
Yes.
I don't think it's hard to argue that a $25 million player, and no matter what you do or don't believe about WAR, if you get an extra 4 WAR from that player, such as Sonny Gray, you're right in that mix. Now, again, that's not exactly how WAR works, and you certainly have a few more wrinkles and nuance to it. But the payroll being reduced is not only the first domino that fell last November or whatever it was, but one of the biggest, if not the biggest, because it not only hurt the team financially and on the field, but I think also in the clubhouse, and there was a cloud that hung over the team, whether they like to admit it or not.
Here's the thing about not spending the money that galls me more than any other part of it. You can't necessarily look into the future and say, yes, this extra player or these extra players would have prevented the Twins from skidding out of the atmosphere in the playoffs. But we're talking about a situation with the TV rights where the future is uncertain. They don't know what the revenue is going to be and for how long in the coming years because of the TV models or the subscription models and all that stuff. We're not asking, the Twins to have spent money on a contract for a 5-year player or a 6-year player for over $100 million. We're talking about a guy for one season and, maybe 2 tops. That is not, that's not going to kill anybody's budget for the rest, of your ownership. It's a penny wise, pound foolish kind of proposition. And that's the way that they decided to go with it. And, it's maybe they don't want to believe that they did the wrong thing or they were being cheap or weren't being cheap, but they definitely were.
Yeah, Eric Petty and not Jared Lorenzen, sorry, not the hefty lefty, may he rest in peace, but Michael Lorenzen. Either one of those two would have made a difference. Maybe not enough of a difference down the stretch, but again, too, when you look at it as 4 games out, they were eliminated with games left, and so that's not exactly an apples to apples comparison of how the season ended. With that said, let's take our first break. When we come back, we'll talk about a hot start for a rival and a slow start for the Twins and how that clouded the rest of the season. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and NFL fans can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's basically like Red Zone, but on your phone. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's, again, on FanDuel. You get a hunch in the middle of the game. You want to see some in-game statistics, some play-by-play, everything you need to keep up with your DFS, your fantasy team, or even just your plays in the FanDuel app, which is obviously highly recommended here. That's where FanDuel is going to help you out a great deal. And again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. It's a no-brainer. You get $200. That's basically free play. You got a hunch, someone you really like in week 5. This is the perfect time to jump in and get that bonus bet put into your account. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. And another fun sponsor of ours is PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. You're not facing some guy in his mom's basement with 100 entries in a big contest, and you've got to nudge him out with his algorithm, and he's going to beat you and get all the money. You don't have to worry about any of that. None of those, inside guys. You don't have to worry about any of that goofiness. All you do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. If you are risk averse, you can play some of the lower multipliers and still make money, but just not as crazy as if you go with some of the more risky picks, because those have higher multipliers. You can win up to 100 times your money with as few as 4 correct picks, and you can get in on the action in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Even Minnesota, I know for sure it is available here, and it's the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an insurance policy. So that if your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your picks live. PrizePicks puts their members first too, so all your withdrawals are safe, fast, and secure. And when your picks hit, you can have your money in as little as 15 minutes. PrizePicks also invented, easy for me to say, the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Really, honestly, I could go on all night with the details. You just got to check it out for yourself. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win. The $50 is guaranteed as a bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. Well, Dave, we are into the second segment here, and Cleveland got out to a crazy start to open the season. 8-2, 19-9, 36-17, 44-23. And I know that we also focused on their start on the road. 14-6 through 20, 21-7 through 28, 27-9 through 36, 31-11 through 42. Now they finished 50-30, which means they went 19-19 the rest of the way. But if you expect a good team to be around 500 on the road, they went and absolutely smoked that. And that's why the Twins were chasing them all year long. Twins start 7-13. And even with, the big winning streak and all that, they just, in my opinion, never seriously threatened the Guardians for the division lead.
Not really. They got kind of close a couple times.
Right.
And we all like to tell ourselves that, this is when, Cleveland's bullpen gets overworked and they implode and the Twins make another move past them. But, I definitely a recurring theme this season was how the Twins had to expend so much energy and time and effort catching up, whether it be to individual issues on their own team or the other teams of the division. And Cleveland getting off to such a good start, along with the Twins not playing well at the beginning of the season. At the very beginning, they got hot after that and kind of set things, so we thought, more evenly. But it kind of set the tone for, it's like those NBA games where, team gets down by 15, 20 points and they make a run and they make another run. And there's a little bit of a surge back and forth. But you put so much energy into just getting back in the game that you're not quite the same team that you were, a quarter and a half earlier. And then the other team ends up pulling away and winning anyway. That's kind of what happened. I don't think that the Guardians' start alone was something that couldn't have been overcome. But as we sort of pointed out along the way, it wasn't the Twins had many avenues to get into the playoffs. It wasn't necessarily just having to overcome the Guardians. They could have been one of the lesser wild card teams like Kansas City or Detroit. And that would have gotten them 9/10 of what Cleveland has now anyway. Maybe an extra round of playoffs, but still in the fight. But the Twins just kind of being on the outside looking in from the Guardians from the start, even if they were telling themselves, we're going to be able to overtake these guys. Cleveland was able to take enough punches that, it didn't matter. I don't think even if the Twins had gotten off to a better start, the way they collapsed, there were so many things that they were fighting by the end of the season. I'm not even sure that, a better start by the Twins would have flipped this division anyway, but it certainly was the first of many things, or the second after the lack of reinforcements from management that got things off to such a bad start and sort of set the tone for the season, which wasn't necessarily all losing, but it certainly all was trying to catch up and catch your breath.
And I think we all kind of equated the team running out of gas as a physical thing, But I think there was a mental aspect to it as well. You can only chase for so long that, again, like once you catch up, you have nothing left to maintain. So it's like it's hard to get on top. It's harder to stay on top. Well, if you start from behind, it's even harder to get on top and virtually impossible to stay on top. And I think that's the buzzsaw the Twins ran into.
You've heard you'll hear pretty much every manager talk about this in the last month of the season. You know, they're the good teams, the pretty good teams. We're all running on fumes in here, you know, and it's that's a physical thing, but it's probably more of a mental thing. And every team goes through it. You're not the same. You don't have the same resilience. You don't have the same ability to bounce back. You don't run as fast, as hard, as often as you do in April. The season is a grind. That's part of the ugly beauty of baseball in a lot of ways. That you know, that's sort of what the game is. It's a war of attrition. And you know, getting back to the first thing, that's why you know, not committing to adding more good players before the season was such a big deal. It wasn't even so much the trade deadline or anything else during the season. It was not going into the season more prepared for the long haul than the Twins did. And then when the Guardians come out and smoke them in that first series, basically at Target Field, and pile on and just, you know, get up to an 8-game lead or something like that by the third week in April, you know, you knew a long season was going to be even longer.
And they asked an awful lot of young guys that wouldn't have been asked that much with added help. Brooks Lee, Edouard Julien, you know, once he started struggling, and at that point, you know, kind of going back and forth, being an up-down guy. Even Jose Miranda, I mean, guys down the stretch who faltered, had a lot asked of them. And I still believe in the talent of each of those individual guys. But when those guys are asked to do more than they're capable of at that point in their careers, and you're leading on Christian Vasquez, who had a slow start, Kyle Farmer, who had a slow start. You know, both those guys turned it on later in the season, and then Vasquez kind of faded again. I mean, it all kind of coalesced into an imperfect, perfect storm for this offense, where they just never could get it all together for long enough to have some staying power, I think would probably be the fairest way to put it. Let's do our last break. When we come back, we have more on the offense, which, you know, is a point of contention in a lot of circles here as we head into the offseason. This episode of Locked On Twins is brought to you by Booking.com, Booking.yeah. You can find just about anywhere that's great to stay, even in your rival cities with Booking.com. They have hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more. On Booking.com, you just might find your perfect stay, even if you got to go to one of those stinky rival cities like Detroit or Cleveland or Milwaukee. You know, with that said, though, it would be great to be going to one of those cities in the postseason. It sure beats sitting at home. But maybe it's time to taste test your baseball competition stadium cuisine. Get a brat or a beer in Milwaukee or some crab cakes in Baltimore. If you were going to do that in the postseason, Booking.com would be the place to go. It has a wide variety of choice across the U.S. You can go incognito in any baseball rival city that you want. Booking.com delivers the right U.S. stay for you and can help you book a stay that's either close to your home team or your rival team's stadium. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. That's Booking.com, Booking.yeah, or in the Booking.com app. All right, Dave, we kind of teased it in the second segment. We'll bring it home with this. The offense, just way too scattershot in its production. Stretch in the middle of the season, 3 months where they were arguably the best offense in the AL in the conversation, MLB-wise. But, as we noted in our most recent episode, inconsistent in big spots. Now, with runners in scoring position, the Twins slashed 243, 320, 412. That's 18th in OPS among 30 MLB teams. With the bases loaded, they slashed 234, 279, 367. That's 23rd. And with 2 outs, 233, 303, 393, that's 16th. Now, one that I forgot last time out. In a full count, the Twins hit 189, 17th in MLB. So not above average in any of those measures. When I look at the offensive talent that was on this team, even with Byron Buxton missing or not playing in 50 some odd games and Carlos Correa missing a large swath of the season, I still feel like being that far down just does not compute with the stretches that they had that were strong. And the fact that like they had some offensive talent and it just they would sleepwalk for long stretches of time. It was just bewildering. Even as someone who understands baseball as a game of failure, I still was like, come on, guys. Are you serious right now?
Yeah. The both deficiencies, the slumping for games at a time or at least innings at a time, where it seemed like they weren't having competitive at bats, even trying to work counts, put themselves in better position to hit. You could see that there were times when they were able to do that. And that's what made it more frustrating when they couldn't come through. You know, it takes talent to put people on base. And all of a sudden, you lose your talent when the bases are loaded or when there are runners in scoring position. It's just it's obviously something more than just talent or, you know, swing playing and all that stuff. There's a mental component to it too, where you're putting too much pressure on yourself or you're trying to do the wrong thing from the start. This is where hopefully a change at hitting coach will at least change the thought process about how those things, you know, that this is something that they're going to work on in the off season. And even if the players ended up being the ones who failed David Popkins, which is very possible, it still might be a good thing for the team to just have made a change, just to get a different person talking to them at this point. That's why a lot of times that's why managers get changed, not necessarily because they're a bad manager all of a sudden, but because they've been tuned out by the players. And maybe that is something that happened with some guys and Popkins, and maybe that can be a thing that can be turned around.
You know, something that's remarkable to me is the consistency of runners left on base between the top team, which was the Nationals, and the bottom team, which was the Guardians. It's about 200 runners difference. So one a game. I mean, really not a huge variance. Twins 15th with 1,092 runners left on base. And I keep coming back to the couple things, noting that the offense, you know, I had mentioned early in the year that they had been scoring runs late in games and, you know, worrying that was unsustainable. I think that may be part of the conversation, but also the Twins finishing 69-22 when scoring 4 or more runs, when scoring 3 or more runs, 81-31 when scoring less than or equal to 3 runs. The Twins were 13-58, less than equal to 4 runs. They were, let's see if I got this here, 25-67. So like 3 or 4 runs was the magic number for them. And again, it's not revolutionary. The teams are going to, you know, flip the switch at about 3 or 4 runs. But it just felt like this was the kind of offense that should have been able to score 4 or 5 runs on a nightly basis.
I don't, you know, that is a surprising, you've mentioned that number before, that the 3 runs, what did you say they were? 81-20?
Greater than or equal to 3 runs.
3 runs or more.
81-31, which is the 6th best record in MLB. You got the Guardians, Padres, Dodgers, all playoff teams.
Right.
Mariners, who were in the mix until the end, and then Astros, a playoff team. Beneath them, Phillies, playoff team. Phillies are playoff team. Mets, playoff team. Braves, playoff team. Yankees, playoff team. Tigers, playoff team. It's like a pretty big divide, and the Twins are right in the thick of things.
Yeah.
And just were let down at the wrong possible time.
That illustrates that number, the good record that they had. They just didn't have enough of those games. They just didn't play enough of those games. And that is, you know, some of that is sometimes not having their big guys in the lineup. But we know that that's not necessarily the only thing, because they had them in the lineup in September and they pooped out. And
does that give you any hope, though, for the future, or is it less like the opposite of that. Like
Not to feel, yes, it does. It gives me hope. But I also feel like that somehow we bought a bill of goods on that. Not that we were sold a bill of goods, but that we gave them too much benefit of the doubt, and maybe we shouldn't have. But those things can vary from season to season. Maybe a new hitting coach will help. Maybe just getting healthy will help. Flushing this season will help. But I think the talent is still real on the team. It's still a pretty deep team. I look forward to what the lineup can do next year. I look forward to what the starting pitching staff can do with the pitchers being 1 year older at the back end of the rotation. And, I like generally how the bullpen scrapped. Jax is one of the 5 best relief pitchers in the league. Cole Sands is one of the 25 best relief pitchers. That's pretty good at the beginning. And I think some of the other pitchers are talented as well. Duran has had better seasons. We'll see what he does in the future, but that might be a guy you move. I don't know. But
getting Brock Stewart back could help. Who knows? Maybe they find.
Don't count on that.
No, I wouldn't.
Don't count on Brock Stewart.
But even Cole, finding the next Cole Sands, whether it's Brent Hedrick or they could find that guy without it being too wild of a proposition. By the way, thank you for making Locked On Twins your first listen today. And for your second, find Locked On MLB. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. By the way, if you would be interested in watching a playoff game with Dave and me, leave a comment in YouTube because maybe it would make sense. Maybe it wouldn't. We don't want to put you guys out if you'd rather not watch an AL Central postseason game with us. But if you would, drop us a line. He's Dave Brown. I'm Brandon Warren saying thank you so much. And we'll see ya
tomorrow
night.
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow. Probably later, yeah.